Hello, my friend. You can call me Joker, or Arthur if you prefer. Names don't matter when the world has already decided you're nothing. Have you ever wondered why some of us do terrible things? Why we snap, lash out, or become the monsters society fears? I've spent countless nights wrestling with that question, and I found it all boils down to fear. Deep, gnawing fear that worms its way into our hearts and refuses to let go. I wasn't born evil. That's too simple. I was born like you, crying, helpless and craving love. I grew up in a cramped apartment with my mother, Penny. She told me I was put here to bring laughter and joy. But Gotham, dirty, uncaring and loud, wasn't a place for bright-eyed dreamers. It greeted me with violence and indifference. Every day was a battle to keep from drowning in fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of being invisible. Fear of being tossed aside like trash. I thought if I just smiled enough, maybe the world would smile back. But fear doesn't just go away. It festers. Every mocking laugh, every bruise from bullies, every humiliating moment on stage as a failed comedian added another layer to my terror. I feared I'd never be worthy of acceptance. I feared I was broken. So I put on a mask, figuratively at first. I pretended everything was fine, but inside I was rotting. One day I realized something. The more I tried to be good, the more the world spat in my face. The more I tried to spread joy, the more it crushed me. I began to suspect that being good was just another form of submission. Fear, my constant companion, started to morph into anger. And anger, when left unchecked, can turn into something far darker. You might ask, but Joker, doesn't everyone feel fear? Doesn't everyone get angry sometimes? Yes, but not everyone is pushed to the brink. Fear becomes evil when it meets desperation, when you have nothing left to lose and no hope of ever fitting in. It's like cornering a wounded animal. Eventually, it bares its teeth, not because it wants to hurt you, but because it's terrified of being hurt again. I remember being mugged in an alley after a stand-up gig. I had just been booed off stage, humiliated by an audience that saw me as a joke. 3 men cornered me. They laughed at my clown makeup, called me names, and beat me until I couldn't stand. In that moment, fear wasn't just a feeling. It was my entire reality. My mind screamed, "Fight back!" But my body was too weak. I was still clinging to the hope they'd show mercy. They didn't. That's when something cracked inside me. When I woke up in the hospital, bruised and battered, I realized I was more afraid of continuing my pathetic existence than I was of dying. That's a dangerous place to be. When your fear of living as a failure outweighs your fear of death, you have nothing left to lose. And that's when evil starts to look like self-preservation. Bad or evil is often just a label slapped on people who refuse to play by the rules. Fear is the catalyst. It pushes you to make choices you never thought you'd make, like carrying a weapon or striking first. It's a shield, a protective shell around your broken heart. You tell yourself, "I'm done being a victim." And so you do what you must, no matter how dark. You convince yourself it's necessary. But is that really evil? Or is it just fear wearing a new face? A face determined to keep you safe at any cost. Let's talk about my job as a party clown. Do you think I liked dressing up in silly costumes, twirling signs, trying to make children laugh while they pointed and giggled at me? I did it because I had to pay the bills, and because I thought maybe if I could make them smile, I'd feel less invisible. But the world had other plans. The kids laughed, but their parents whispered about me. My co-workers mocked me. My boss treated me like garbage. Every day, my fear of being stuck in that life forever grew stronger. Fear told me, you'll never escape this. And with that fear came desperation. Desperation can push you to extremes. For some, it's running away. For others, it's lashing out. For me, it was a slow descent into madness, or what society calls madness. In reality, it was just my mind's way of protecting me from a world that had shown me no mercy. The laughter I used to crave became my own twisted laughter, a reminder that if the world was going to laugh at me, I'd laugh right back, only louder. Then came the day on the subway with those 3 businessmen. They harassed me. Maybe they thought I was weak, or maybe they just needed someone to bully. At first, the old fear crept in. I was cornered again, outnumbered, powerless. But then, something snapped. The fear turned into rage, a primal instinct for survival. And in one irreversible moment, I did something terrible. I pulled the trigger. Was it evil? Society thinks so. But from my perspective, it was the culmination of years of being hunted by my own fears. I wasn't just shooting them. I was shooting every bully who ever hurt me, every sneer that made me feel worthless. Fear is cumulative. It piles up until it crushes you, or until you explode. In the aftermath, I didn't feel remorse. I felt liberated. Fear had always been my prison, but in that moment I broke free, at a terrible cost. The mask of fear I'd been wearing transformed into the mask of the Joker. I realized that if the world was going to paint me as a villain, I might as well play the part. After all, it's better to be feared than to be invisible. People will say, oh, he's insane, he's a monster. They don't see the years of silent suffering. They don't see the heartbreak and terror that built up inside me. They only see the final, violent outcome. And that's the tragedy. Because maybe if someone had offered a helping hand, things could have been different. But that's the world we live in. A place where fear rules us all. Fear of losing our jobs. Fear of losing our status. Fear of not being loved. And when fear takes over, we do desperate things. We hurt each other. We tear each other down, thinking it will keep us safe. But it doesn't. It just creates more pain, more fear, more broken souls. So here I am telling you my story, not to justify what I've done, but to show you that evil isn't born in a vacuum. It grows from seeds of terror planted in the darkest corners of our minds. It flourishes when the world turns its back on us, when every cry for help is met with laughter or scorn. And what about you, my friend? Are you afraid? Of course you are. Everyone is. The question is, what will you do with that fear? Will you let it consume you, twist you into something unrecognizable? Or will you find a way to face it before it's too late? Facing your fears isn't easy. It means acknowledging the painful truth that you might be alone. that the safety net you thought you had was never really there. But it's the only way to avoid becoming the very thing you dread. Still, there's a part of me that finds power in embracing the darkness. Because once you have nothing left to lose, fear can no longer control you. And that's a heady sensation. A sense of liberation that's hard to describe unless you've felt it yourself. Maybe that's why some of us choose evil. Because it's the only way we know how to break free from the terror that's been haunting us all our lives. So, is evil really just a mask? Yes, it's the mask we wear when we can't stand to be afraid anymore. It's the armor we put on when the world has beaten us to our knees and left us with no other choice but to strike back. And it's a mask that, once worn, is very hard to remove. Because behind it lies a wounded soul, and facing that wound can be far more terrifying than any act of violence. I don't expect you to sympathize with me. I just want you to understand that beneath every villain's grin, there's a story of fear, rejection, and despair. If you look closely, you might see your own reflection in it. And that, my friend, is the real horror. Realizing how easily fear can warp even the kindest heart into something monstrous. But perhaps that realization can also be our salvation. Because if we know fear is the root, then maybe we can pull it out before it grows too deep. Maybe we can learn to face our demons head on, to seek help before we cross the point of no return. Maybe, just maybe, we can keep that mask from becoming permanent. As for me, my story is already written in blood and tears. I am what the world made me, and I've found a strange sort of freedom in that acceptance. The laughter you hear from me now, it's not joy. It's the sound of a man who has nothing left to lose, a man who has seen the worst the world has to offer and survived. It's the laughter of someone who knows fear intimately and has chosen to wear it like a second skin. So the next time you see someone you might call evil, ask yourself, what are they so afraid of? And what pushed them to choose darkness over light? You might be surprised at how similar their fears are to yours. And that's the final punchline, isn't it? We're all just one bad day away from becoming the thing we fear the most. That, my friend, is why I say, evil isn't born, it's made. And fear is the hand that molds it.